The Prime Minister, Bill English, met with the head of the Defence Force yesterday afternoon, and he joins me now in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you spoke to the Chief of Defence, Lieutenant General Tim Keating, yesterday. Do you now think you have the full picture?
I think there'll probably be some detail to fill out, but certainly enough of the picture that the allegations of war crimes now seem to apply to some other place, not the place where the New Zealand operation was carried out, so it's unlikely we would have an inquiry into those war crime allegations.
To clarify, is an inquiry of any kind warranted into what went on here?
So far, that's not the case, and I think the evidence that came out yesterday and is going to be discussed today shows why it's important to step through these things pretty carefully. We'll get some further advice about the actual obligations of the Commander of the Defence Forces with respect to these sorts of allegations, but it's unlikely to end up as an inquiry into war crimes.
Does it have to be an inquiry into war crimes? Can it not simply be an inquiry into what went on that night in that raid, which everyone seems to agree is called Operation Burnham?
Well, that seems to be about the only thing they agree on.
Well, they agree on the name, they agree on the date. People seem to agree also that it took place within 2 kilometres of each other.
And look, there'll be ongoing discussion about how the operation was reviewed, the report by the coalition forces. And as I said, further advice about the role of the CDF in this, because he's at the centre of the statutory way or legal way in which these allegations should be dealt with. But I think, as I said, the information yesterday, I think, very much narrows down the scope for inquiries.
Do you think any civilians were killed in Operation Burnham?
Well, there is no evidence that was the case. The possibility is suggested. It was suggested publicly 5 or 6 years ago, but no one has produced evidence that there were civilian losses. The investigation at the time couldn't establish it, even though they recognised there was the possibility.
What does the Official Information Act request mean, though, when it states that the 2010 raid in Baglan involved a suspected civilian casualty? Does that not raise questions that perhaps there was at least one civilian death? Well,
it may raise that question. I'm acting on the advice that I have seen.
But NZDF have for years maintained that there were no civilian casualties. Under OIA, they have had to say that actually there was a suspected civilian casualty. So you've got to question which other details may not perhaps be the ones that are being given out publicly.
Well, look, there's been so much discussion about this, so many kind of layers of sources and allegations that I think any statement made outside the scope of the original investigation is one you'd need to look into pretty carefully.
Now, well, this is why people perhaps are saying, is this why an inquiry is then needed? Because this is so difficult to pull apart, and the only way to do it is to get someone central to do it.
Well, look, if it's the case, as it appears to be, that all the allegations relate to different villages than where the New Zealand operation actually occurred, that does tend to undermine a lot of the allegations. In fact, in my view, it removes them substantially. And that's what. But as you've indicated, there's this OIA. We're happy to and will keep going through this considered process.
Because something that the statement doesn't address is the helicopters. So New Zealand Defence Force didn't have any people in the 2 villages named in the book by John Stephenson and Nicky Hager. But it doesn't say that the villagers weren't shot at by helicopters that were under the New Zealand command, does it? Is that a possibility?
Well, look, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that question. There was publicly reported overview of the operation a number of years ago that included a reference to a helicopter where the gun sights weren't operational or properly operational, and that is what has given rise to the possibility that there may have been civilian deaths. The subsequent investigation couldn't establish that there had been in the village where the New Zealand operation occurred. Now, if there was, again, other evidence that came forward, of course we'd be interested in that.
If the raid happened like the New Zealand Defence Force said that it did, that there was no civilian casualties, Why did the Defence Minister of the time, Wayne Mapp, describe it as a fiasco?
Well, I understand Mr. Mapp's comments were based on the documentary, which was produced, I think, by John Stephenson, one of the authors of the book. This is what I mean by layers of allegations, that a number of the views you're hearing are based not on an understanding of the original operation, but on how it's been presented in a documentary.
So you can confirm at this stage no inquiry into the allegations contained in Hit and Run?
Well, as yet, we haven't seen a sound basis for an inquiry. As I said, the evidence yesterday, I think, almost certainly means there won't be an inquiry into war crimes. Whether there's an inquiry into other aspects of it, we'll be moving through that over the next few days.
So you're not ruling that out?
Well, look, it's I'm not completely ruling out an inquiry, but certainly the allegations of war crimes appear to be, as was originally stated, unfounded. And I think that would be a big step forward. As I said, we'll get a bit more advice. This is a complex, it's been a complex set of circumstances, and as we've stepped through it, things have come to light, which I think change our view of it.
Do you think that the public have a right to know what happened?
Well, what happened has been out in the public arena for now 5 or 6 years. More detail of that will be discussed today by the CDF as he explains this difference, that is that the operation happened in one village, and the book is all about two quite different villages.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning. That's the Prime Minister, Bill English, in the studio in Wellington here. It's now 26 minutes to 8.